I never thought sledding down my own backyard hill after sunset would land me in a war with the most insufferable woman in Pine Ridge, Colorado. But here we are, standing in my garage at 9 p.m. installing industrial floodlights aimed directly at Patricia Montgomery's bedroom window. Let me back up a few weeks. I bought my house in Pine Ridge Estates last November, a decent 3-bedroom ranch on the edge of the development with a massive backyard that sloped down into a wooded area. The property was perfect for my 12-year-old son, Marcus, who spent half his time with me after the divorce. The hill was steep enough for great sledding but not dangerous, and the trees at the bottom provided a natural barrier. When the first real snowfall hit in mid-December, Marcus and I were out there with our sleds before the flakes stopped falling. We had a blast that first afternoon, racing down the hill, building jumps, the whole 9 yards. But Marcus had basketball practice after school most days, so we started going out in the evenings after dinner. The slope faced away from most of the neighbors, and we set up some camping lanterns at the top and bottom so we could see. Nothing crazy, just a father and son enjoying winter in Colorado. That lasted exactly 3 evenings before Patricia showed up at my door. I opened it to find a woman in her late 40s with an asymmetrical blonde haircut that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," and a puffy white coat that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. She held a leather-bound notebook and wore an expression like she had just discovered someone littering in a church. "Hello, I am Patricia Montgomery, president of the Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association," she announced without waiting for me to speak. "You must be Robert Vance. I need to discuss some violations with you." "Violations?" I had been here less than a month. "What violations?" She flipped open her notebook with practiced efficiency. Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that recreational activities are prohibited between the hours of 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. Your sledding activities are disturbing the peace of the neighborhood. I blinked at her. Disturbing the peace. It is barely past 7:30, and my backyard slopes into the woods. Who are we disturbing? The rules exist for a reason, Mr. Vance. Her voice carried that particular condescending tone that made my teeth grind. If we allow one homeowner to break the rules, the entire community structure collapses. I will need you to cease these activities immediately or face fines. How much are these fines? I asked, already annoyed. $50 per occurrence. She snapped her notebook shut. I have documented 3 violations so far. That is $150. You will receive a formal notice in the mail. My jaw dropped. Are you serious? We are just sledding in my own backyard. The bylaws are quite clear. Good evening, Mr. Vance. She turned on her designer boots and marched back down my driveway to her massive house 3 doors down, the one with the professionally landscaped yard and the fountain that probably violated 17 water conservation ordinances. Marcus appeared behind me, still in his snow pants. "Dad, who was that?" "The HOA president," I muttered. "Apparently we are criminals for having fun in our own yard. I should have left it alone. I should have paid the stupid fine and found something else to do with Marcus in the evenings." But something about Patricia's smug attitude made me want to dig in my heels. I had bought this house specifically for the yard and privacy, and some power-hungry busybody was not going to tell me I could not play with my son on my own property. The next day, I pulled out the HOA documents I had barely glanced at during closing. Buried in the 73 pages of single-spaced legalese, I found Section 12, Paragraph 4. It referenced noise-generating recreational activities, but included exceptions for seasonal activities consistent with community standards. In Colorado, Sledding was absolutely a seasonal activity consistent with community standards. Half the neighborhoods in the state had kids sledding in winter. I called the HOA hotline and left a detailed message explaining my interpretation of the bylaw. 2 days later, I received a certified letter informing me that the HOA board had reviewed my case and upheld the violation. The fine was now $200, as we had gone sledding again the previous evening. There was also a note that further violations would result in a lien on my property. A lien over sledding. I showed the letter to my buddy Eric, who worked as a real estate attorney in Denver. We met for lunch at a sports bar in Castle Rock, halfway between his office and Pine Ridge. Technically, they can fine you, Eric said, scanning the documents on his tablet while demolishing a plate of wings. The bylaws are vague enough that they have discretion in enforcement. But threatening a lien this quickly is aggressive. Most HOAs do not go that route unless someone is building an unauthorized structure or letting their yard become a junkyard. So what are my options? Eric wiped sauce off his fingers. You can fight it. Request a hearing with the board, present your interpretation, see if you can get other homeowners to support you. Or you can comply and stop sledding after 8. Or you can pay the fines and keep doing it. Those fines will add up fast, I pointed out. $50 every time we go out. That is ridiculous. Yeah, well, HOAs are ridiculous. Eric shrugged. I have seen them go after people for having the wrong shade of white on their mailbox. The problem is, you signed a contract agreeing to follow their rules when you bought the house. They have legal standing even if the rules are stupid. I left lunch feeling defeated. That evening, Marcus and I stayed inside, watching him grow increasingly restless and bored. He kept looking out the window at the perfect sledding hill covered in fresh powder. Finally, around 7:45, he turned to me with those puppy dog eyes that always destroyed my resolve. Dad, can we please go out? Just for a little bit. I thought about Patricia and her stupid notebook and her threats. Then I thought about the limited time I had with my son and how these years would be gone before I knew it. I grabbed our coats. Get your boots on. We are going sledding. We had an amazing time that night. The moon was nearly full, reflecting off the snow and making the whole hill glow silver. We built a massive jump near the bottom and spent an hour perfecting our technique. Marcus's laugh echoed through the cold air, pure and joyful. This was what mattered, not some arbitrary rule in an HOA handbook. The next morning, Patricia was back on my doorstep at 7 a.m. sharp, waking me up by leaning on the doorbell. Mr. Vance. She was practically vibrating with indignation. I observed your flagrant violation of HOA policy last night. This is completely unacceptable. You are now facing a $500 fine, and I am recommending to the board that we begin lien proceedings. I was too tired for this. Patricia, we were sledding, in my yard. My son and I were having fun. No one else in this neighborhood cares. I care. Her voice rose to a near shriek. I care about maintaining property values and community standards. Your defiant attitude is exactly what leads to neighborhood decay. Sledding is not neighborhood decay. It is winter in Colorado, I shot back. Maybe if you tried having fun once in a while, you would not be so miserable. Her face turned an impressive shade of crimson. You will regret this, Mr. Vance. I will make sure this association holds you accountable for every single violation. She spun around and stormed off, nearly slipping on a patch of ice on my walkway. I briefly hoped she would fall, but no such luck. After she left, I called Eric again. They are threatening a lien over sledding. Can they actually do that? They can try, Eric said. Look, you need to go to a board meeting. Explain your side. Get your neighbors involved. If Patricia is being this aggressive over something this minor, chances are she has pissed off other people too. You might have allies you do not know about. The next Pine Ridge Estates HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 7 p.m. in the community center, a converted garage at the entrance to the development. I showed up 15 minutes early to find about 20 other homeowners already there, most looking annoyed at having to spend their evening this way. The community center was cramped and overheated, with folding chairs arranged in rows facing a table where Patricia sat with two other board members. I recognized one as Howard Chen, a retired engineer who lived near the playground, and the other as Brenda Sullivan, a real estate agent with an office in town. Neither looked particularly thrilled to be there. Patricia called the meeting to order with several sharp raps of a gavel that seemed entirely too dramatic for a neighborhood HOA. Welcome, everyone. We have several items on tonight's agenda, beginning with Treasurer's report from Howard. Howard droned through a financial summary that revealed the HOA had about $40,000 in reserves and was running a slight surplus. Then Brenda gave an update on landscaping for the common areas. Finally, Patricia got to new business, and her eyes locked onto me with obvious satisfaction. We need to address a serious issue of non-compliance with community bylaws, she began. Robert Vance of 1247 Elkhorn Drive has repeatedly violated Section 12, Paragraph 4 regarding noise restrictions during evening hours. Despite multiple warnings and escalating fines, he continues to engage in recreational sledding activities after 8 p.m. I raised my hand. I would like to respond to that. Patricia's lips pursed. There will be time for comments from homeowners at the end of the meeting. Actually, Howard interrupted, if this directly concerns him, he should have a chance to address the board now. Patricia looked like she had bitten into a lemon, but she gestured stiffly for me to speak. I stood up, suddenly aware of everyone's eyes on me. Thanks. Look, I am not trying to cause problems. I moved here in November, and my son Marcus and I have been sledding in my backyard a few times a week after dinner. The yard backs up to woods. We are not making excessive noise, just sledding. It is a normal winter activity in Colorado. The bylaw mentions seasonal activities consistent with community standards, and I think sledding fits that description perfectly. The bylaw also clearly states no recreational activities after 8 p.m., Patricia cut in. Your personal interpretation does not override the written rule. But the rule has exceptions built into it, I countered. And honestly, who am I bothering? My nearest neighbor is 200 feet away on one side and 300 on the other. The hill faces the woods. Unless someone is specifically watching for us, they would not even know we are out there. A woman in the third row raised her hand. I live 4 houses down from Mr. Vance. I have never heard anything from his yard at night. I did not even know he was sledding until Patricia mentioned it at book club. Another man spoke up. My kids have been begging to go sledding at night. Are we all going to get fined if we do? Patricia's expression hardened. The rules apply equally to everyone. If we make exceptions, the entire structure breaks down. Or maybe the rules are dumb and we should change them, someone else called out. The meeting devolved into a heated debate about HOA overreach, with more people than I expected coming to my defense. It turned out Patricia had made herself pretty unpopular over the years with aggressive enforcement of minor violations. Howard Chen mentioned getting fined for having a basketball hoop that was 3 inches too close to the street. Brenda Sullivan admitted she had received a violation notice for leaving her garage door open past noon on a Saturday. By the end of the meeting, the board agreed to table the sledding issue and review the bylaws for potential revisions. Patricia looked furious, but she was outvoted 2-1. I left feeling cautiously optimistic that common sense might prevail. That optimism lasted about 3 days. On Friday evening, Marcus and I were just heading out to the hill when I noticed Patricia standing in her driveway with her phone pointed at my house. She was recording us. I waved sarcastically and she quickly lowered the phone, but the message was clear. She was watching, documenting, building a case. "Is that the HOA lady?" Marcus asked, following my gaze. "Yeah, that is her. She looks mean." "She is definitely something." I forced a smile. "Come on, let's go have fun." We sledded for about an hour, and I tried to ignore the prickly feeling of being watched. When we came back inside, red-cheeked and happy, I made hot chocolate while Marcus talked about the upcoming basketball tournament. For a little while, I forgot about Patricia and her vendetta. The next morning brought another certified letter. This one informed me that Patricia had filed a formal complaint with the county about potential safety hazards on my property. A code enforcement officer would be coming to inspect the sledding hill within 10 business days. I called Eric again, my patience officially exhausted. "She called the county on me. For sledding. Is she insane?" "She is desperate," Eric said. "You embarrassed her at the meeting and now she is trying to find any way to shut you down." The good news is county code enforcement is not going to care about sledding. They deal with actual safety issues like unstable structures or fire hazards. They will probably show up, take a look, and tell her to stop wasting their time. And if they do find something, then you deal with it, but I doubt they will. Your hill is just a hill. There is nothing illegal about sledding on your own property. Eric was right. The code enforcement officer, a tired-looking guy named Dan, showed up the following Wednesday, walked around my yard for about 10 minutes, and declared everything perfectly fine. "Madam," he said to Patricia, who had conveniently appeared during the inspection, "there is nothing unsafe about this yard. It is just a hill with some snow on it. Please do not call us again unless there is an actual code violation." Patricia sputtered something about liability and negligence, but Dan was already climbing back into his county truck. He gave me a sympathetic nod as he drove away. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. Patricia had tried the HOA route. She had tried the county route, and both had failed. Surely she would move on to harassing someone else. I was wrong. 2 nights later, Marcus was at his mother's house and I was catching up on work emails when I heard a loud crash from my backyard. I grabbed a flashlight and rushed outside to find that someone had scattered a bunch of trash across the sledding hill. Old cans, broken glass, plastic bottles, just garbage everywhere. In the snow, barely visible in the beam of my flashlight, I could see a single set of footprints leading from the woods up the hill and back down again. I spent an hour cleaning it up, carefully picking out shards of glass so Marcus would not get hurt. The whole time I felt anger building in my chest. This was beyond petty HOA enforcement. This was deliberate sabotage, and I had a pretty good idea who was responsible. I set up a trail camera the next day, the kind hunters use, pointed at the hill. If someone came back, I would have evidence. But nothing happened for a week. The camera captured deer, a fox, and once a very confused raccoon, but no midnight vandals. Then Patricia filed another complaint, this time claiming I was running a business out of my home without proper permits. Where she got that idea, I had no clue. I worked remotely for a software company in Boulder, but that was not the same as running a business. Still, it meant more paperwork, more time wasted explaining that I was not operating a commercial enterprise. At this point, I was done playing defense. Patricia wanted a war. Fine. I would give her one. I started researching her property, looking for any HOA violations she might be committing. It did not take long. Her decorative fountain ran 24 hours a day, which seemed like it might violate water usage guidelines. Her landscaping lights were bright enough to be seen from space, potentially violating the same noise and light ordinances she was using against me. And her garbage cans were visible from the street most of the week, which was definitely against HOA rules about storing bins out of sight. I documented everything with photos and timestamps, then submitted formal violation reports to the HOA. Patricia was going to learn what it felt like to be on the receiving end of petty complaints. The response was immediate and predictable. Patricia called an emergency board meeting to address what she termed retaliatory harassment by me. I attended that meeting with a thick folder of documentation and a smile that probably looked more hostile than friendly. Mr. Vance has submitted numerous frivolous complaints as retaliation for legitimate enforcement actions, Patricia announced to the board. This is clearly an attempt to intimidate HOA leadership. Or, I said calmly, it is an attempt to ensure that rules are applied equally to everyone, including board members. If I am going to get fined for sledding in my yard, then you should get fined for violating storage regulations and water usage policies. Howard Chen cleared his throat. Patricia, are your garbage bins visible from the street? That is not relevant to this discussion, Patricia snapped. Actually, it is exactly relevant, Brenda Sullivan said, flipping through her copy of the bylaws. Section 8 requires all refuse containers to be stored out of sight except on collection days. If we are enforcing rules against Robert, we need to enforce them against everyone. The meeting went downhill from there, with Patricia becoming increasingly defensive and the other board members looking more uncomfortable. By the end, Howard and Brenda had agreed to conduct a neighborhood-wide review of compliance, applying rules equally to everyone. Patricia voted against it, but she was overruled. I left that meeting feeling vindicated but also exhausted. This whole situation had spiraled way beyond what it should have been. I just wanted to sled with my son. Marcus noticed something was wrong when he came back that weekend. "Dad, you seem stressed." "Just some stuff with the HOA," I said, not wanting to burden him with adult problems. "The mean lady." "Yeah, the mean lady." I ruffled his hair. "Nothing for you to worry about, but Marcus was 12, old enough to pick up on tension. Is it because of sledding?" "Because we can stop if it is causing problems." That was when I realized how much this stupid conflict was affecting both of us. "No way. We are not stopping. This is our house, our yard, and our time together. Nobody gets to take that away from us." We went sledding that night, and I made sure we had the best run yet, staying out until almost 10. If Patricia was watching, good. Let her see that she had not won. The realization hit me the next morning while I was drinking coffee and staring at my backyard. Patricia's house was 3 doors down and slightly elevated. From her back bedroom windows, she probably had a clear view of my sledding hill. That was how she always knew when we were out there. She was literally watching us from her window. The pettiest, most satisfying idea I had ever had bloomed in my mind right then. I spent that afternoon at Home Depot, loading my truck with commercial-grade floodlights, the kind construction crews use for night work. Each one put out about 10,000 lumens, bright enough to turn night into day. I bought 4 of them along with mounting brackets, extension cords, and everything else I would need. Eric called while I was loading the truck. "How are things with the HOA situation?" "About to get interesting," I said. "Hey, hypothetically, are there laws about what kind of lights I can put up on my own property?" There was a long pause. "What are you planning, Rob? Just some security lighting for the backyard, for safety when we are sledding?" "Uh-huh." And would these security lights happen to point toward Patricia's house? They might illuminate in that general direction, yes. Eric sighed. Okay, technically you can put lights on your property. But if they are deliberately aimed to harass a neighbor, she could potentially argue it is a nuisance and get a court order. You would need to be able to claim a legitimate purpose. Safety lighting for recreational activities. That is legitimate, right? Rob, I am saying this as your friend and your lawyer. Whatever you are planning, think very carefully about whether it is worth it. I thanked him and hung up. I had thought about it. It was definitely worth it. That evening I set to work. I mounted 2 floodlights on the back corners of my house, and 2 on poles I sank into the ground near the sledding hill. Then I carefully angled them. Ostensibly, they lit up the entire slope for safe sledding. Coincidentally, at least 2 of them also sent brilliant beams directly toward Patricia's house, specifically toward what property records indicated was the master bedroom on the 2nd floor. I did not turn them on immediately. Instead, I waited until the following evening when Marcus was back with his mother. At exactly 8 p.m., prime sledding time, I flipped the switch. The backyard blazed with light. It was beautiful, honestly, like a ski resort. Every detail of the hill stood out in sharp relief. And up the slope, Patricia's house was absolutely bathed in brightness. Her bedroom windows practically glowed. I grabbed a sled and spent 30 minutes going up and down the hill, making sure any observers could see I was legitimately using the lights for their stated purpose. Then I went inside, made dinner, and left the lights on. At 9:15, my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. This is Patricia Montgomery. Your lights are shining directly into my bedroom. Turn them off immediately. Hi, Patricia. Sorry, but I need those lights for safe sledding. Section 12, paragraph 4 says I cannot sled after 8 p.m., but with proper lighting, I think it is reasonable to interpret that as referring to unsafe conditions. These lights ensure safety. This is harassment. I will call the police. For exterior lighting on my own property. Go ahead. I checked the county ordinances. There is no restriction on residential floodlights as long as they serve a legitimate purpose. Mine do. She hung up without another word. The police did come, about 40 minutes later. Officer Michelle Kim was professional and thorough, taking notes while I explained the situation. So you put up these lights for sledding? She asked. Exactly. The HOA president has been citing me for sledding after dark, claiming it is unsafe. With these lights, it is perfectly safe. I can show you the documentation of all the complaints she has filed against me if you need context. Officer Kim walked around the yard, examining the light placement, and they shine toward your neighbor's house. The slope naturally faces that direction. The lights illuminate the sledding path. If they happen to also light up the area beyond my property line, that is just the reality of the geography. She wrote something in her notepad. Mr. Vance, I am not going to tell you to turn them off because you are not violating any laws. But I am going to suggest that neighbor disputes are better resolved through conversation than escalation. Talk to your neighbor, see if you can reach a compromise. I tried that, officer. She responded by filing multiple complaints, calling county code enforcement, and generally making my life miserable for spending time with my son. Officer Kim looked sympathetic. I understand. Just be aware that if this continues to escalate, you could both end up in small claims court fighting over who harassed who. That is not fun for anyone. After she left, I stood in my backyard looking at those lights and feeling conflicted. Part of me was triumphant. Patricia had spent weeks making me miserable, and now she was getting a taste of her own medicine. But another part wondered if I had gone too far. I turned off the lights and went to bed. The next morning, Saturday, Marcus came bounding into my room at 7 a.m. "Dad, did you put up new lights in the backyard? They are so cool." I had forgotten he was coming early for the weekend. "Yeah, buddy, I did. Want to try sledding with them tonight?" "Yes, that is going to be awesome." We spent the day running errands and shooting hoops at the park. Marcus was excited about the lights, talking nonstop about how we could sled even when it was really dark. His enthusiasm reminded me why I was fighting this battle in the first place. These were precious years with my son, and I refused to let someone take them away over a stupid power trip. That evening, we turned on the lights and hit the slopes. Marcus was right. It was awesome. The whole hill was bright as midday, and we could see every bump and drift. We built a massive jump and spent an hour perfecting our technique. At one point, Marcus landed a trick that sent snow spraying everywhere, and his victorious yell probably carried across half the neighborhood. I glanced up toward Patricia's house and saw her bedroom curtains were drawn tight, heavy material blocking out the light. Good. Let her hide in the dark while we enjoyed ourselves. We were packing up the sleds around 9:30 when a car pulled into my driveway. I did not recognize it until a woman got out and I realized it was Denise Jackson, the woman from the HOA meeting who had defended me. "Hi, sorry to bother you," she called. "I live down on Badger Trail. I saw your lights from the street and wanted to check out your setup. My kids have been begging for something similar." Marcus and I walked over, sled still in hand. "Sure, come take a look." Denise followed us to the backyard and I explained the light setup. She took photos and asked about costs. "This is fantastic. My yard has a similar slope. I am going to do the same thing." "Just be aware you might make some enemies on the HOA board," I warned. She laughed. "Patricia already hates me because I let my grass get to 4 inches last summer instead of the required 3. I am not worried." After Denise left, Marcus turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Other people do not like her either, huh?" "Nope. Turns out Patricia has annoyed a lot of people in this neighborhood." "Good. I was worried she might actually shut us down." "Not a chance, buddy, I promise." The following week tested that promise. Patricia filed a formal complaint about the lights with the county, claiming they were a public nuisance. I received a visit from a different code enforcement officer, this one a woman named Sandra, who seemed annoyed at having to be there. "Mr. Vance, I need to see these lights everyone is complaining about," she said. It was 2 p.m., broad daylight, so we could not demonstrate the full effect. I showed her the setup and explained the purpose. Sandra took measurements, verified that the lights were on my property, and checked county codes on her tablet. "There is no violation here," she finally said. "The lights are on your property, they serve a stated purpose, and they do not exceed commercial brightness levels. The complainant will need to pursue this as a civil matter if she wants them removed. So I am good to keep using them. As far as the county is concerned, yes. Though you might want to consider whether winning this fight is worth the ongoing headache." After Sandra left, I called Eric with an update. "County says the lights are legal." "Okay, but Rob, be prepared for Patricia to sue. She could file a nuisance claim and argue that the lights are deliberately aimed to harass her. You would have to defend that in court." "Would she win?" "Hard to say. You have a legitimate stated purpose, but if she can prove the lights are excessive or deliberately positioned to cause her distress, a judge might order you to reposition them. It would depend on the specifics." "So what do you recommend?" Eric was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I recommend trying to negotiate. This situation is only going to get worse and more expensive for both of you. Maybe propose a compromise. You will adjust the lights if she drops all the HOA complaints and fines." It was reasonable advice. I knew that. but the thought of giving Patricia anything after everything she had put me through made my blood boil. I will think about it. That night, I left the lights off, not because I was backing down, but because Marcus had homework and I needed to think about the next move. Escalating further felt good in the moment, but could have serious consequences. Maybe Eric was right. Maybe it was time to be the bigger person and extend an olive branch. I was mulling this over when my doorbell rang at 8 p.m. I opened it expecting Patricia, but found Howard Chen instead. "Robert, got a minute?" He looked uncomfortable. "Sure, come in." I led him to the living room. Howard settled onto the couch with a heavy sigh. "Look, I wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia is pushing for an emergency special assessment of $5,000 per household to fund legal action against you. She is claiming your behavior constitutes harassment of HOA leadership and wants the association to sue you." My jaw dropped. $5,000. She wants to make every homeowner pay $5,000 so she can sue me for having lights in my yard. Essentially, yes. Brenda and I are opposed, but Patricia is pulling every procedural trick she can to force a vote. The annual meeting is next month, and she is going to make this a major issue. Is there any chance she could actually win that vote? Howard shook his head. I doubt it. Most homeowners are not going to approve a massive assessment for what is clearly a personal vendetta. But she is going to try, and it is going to be ugly. After Howard left, I sat in the dark living room for a long time. This had officially spiraled completely out of control. What started as a simple dispute about sledding had turned into threats of lawsuits and special assessments. I needed to end this, one way or another. The next morning, I did something I should have done weeks ago. I wrote a letter to Patricia, carefully worded and reasonable, proposing a truce. I would adjust the lights to minimize impact on her property if she would drop all pending fines and complaints and agree to leave the sledding issue alone. I offered to meet in person to discuss terms. I even had Eric review the letter to make sure it could not be used against me later. I hand-delivered it to her mailbox that afternoon, hoping for a mature response. Instead, 2 days later, I received a letter from an attorney representing Patricia personally. The letter demanded I remove the lights immediately and pay her $2,000 in damages for emotional distress, or she would file a lawsuit in district court. I called Eric. She lawyered up. "What are her demands?" I read him the letter. Eric swore softly. "Okay, she is claiming intentional infliction of emotional distress. That is a high bar to clear. She would need to prove your conduct was extreme and outrageous. Given that you have a legitimate purpose for the lights, I do not think she would win. But defending it would still cost you money and time. So what are my options? 3 choices. 1. Comply with her demands. 2. Ignore the letter and let her sue, then defend yourself. 3. Counter-sue for harassment and abusive process. Go on the offensive. What would you do? Eric laughed. I would try really hard to have never gotten into this mess in the first place, but since you are already here, I would probably ignore the letter, call her bluff. If she actually files suit, we will defend it. But my guess is her lawyer is just sending a scary letter hoping you will fold. I took his advice and did not respond. A week passed, then 2. No lawsuit materialized. The sledding season was starting to wind down as we moved into late February, with warmer days melting the snow. Marcus and I went out a few more times, lights blazing, but the magic was fading. The hill was getting muddy. The runs were slower, and both of us knew spring was coming. The Pine Ridge Estate's annual meeting arrived in early March. I attended with Eric, who came as moral support and to provide legal advice if needed. The community center was packed, probably triple the attendance of normal meetings. Word had spread about Patricia's proposed special assessment, and people were angry. Patricia called the meeting to order and immediately launched into a presentation about the importance of HOA authority and the need to defend against residents who undermined community standards. She had prepared a slideshow with photos of my lights, printouts of my retaliatory violation reports against her, and a timeline of what she characterized as escalating harassment. This resident has deliberately created unsafe conditions, ignored legitimate enforcement actions, and engaged in targeted harassment of HOA leadership, she concluded. I am proposing a special assessment to fund legal defense of our association's authority. Howard Chen raised his hand. Patricia, before we discuss that, I think we need to address whether the original violation notices were appropriate. The board has reviewed Section 12, Paragraph 4 extensively, and Brenda and I believe sledding falls under the seasonal activity exception. Your interpretation is incorrect, Patricia said icily. Actually, we brought in a lawyer to review the bylaws, Brenda Sullivan said, standing up. She agrees that seasonal recreational activities like sledding are permitted under the current language, regardless of time of day, as long as they are not generating excessive noise. Mr. Vance's sledding does not meet the threshold for excessive noise. A murmur ran through the crowd. Patricia's face went red. That is absurd. The intent of the rule is clearly to prevent nighttime disturbances. The intent does not override the actual written language, Howard said firmly. And frankly, Patricia, your enforcement has been selective and excessive. Several other homeowners have engaged in winter activities after 8 p.m. without receiving violations. This appears to be targeted at Mr. Vance specifically. Patricia sputtered, but Howard continued. Furthermore, the special assessment proposal is inappropriate. This is a personal dispute, not an association matter. The HOA should not be funding a lawsuit based on one board member's vendetta. Vendetta. Patricia's voice reached a shrill pitch. This is about maintaining order and property values. Denise Jackson stood up from the audience. Patricia, property values are not affected by someone sledding in their yard. You are abusing your position to harass a neighbor because you did not like being challenged. That is what this is really about. Several people applauded. Patricia looked around the room, seeming to realize she had lost the crowd. This is exactly the kind of chaos that happens when authority is not respected. If you all want to live in a neighborhood with no standards, fine. But do not come crying to me when everything falls apart. She gathered her materials and walked out of the meeting. Just left. Howard and Brenda looked stunned. Well, Howard said after a long pause, I guess we need to table the special assessment proposal since the board member who proposed it is no longer present. All in favor. The vote was unanimous. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to thank me for standing up to Patricia. A few asked about the lights, genuinely interested in installing similar setups. Howard pulled me aside. Patricia sent an email earlier today resigning from the board, effective immediately. I did not mention it during the meeting because I wanted to give her a chance to make a graceful exit, but she apparently preferred the dramatic storming out approach. She resigned. Yeah. Reading between the lines, I think she realized she had lost support and did not want to face a recall election. She is burned out and probably embarrassed. Howard shook his head. Look, Robert, I am sorry about all of this. The board should have shut down her excessive enforcement from the start. We let it go too far. I appreciate that. So where do things stand with the fines and everything? We will void all of them at the next board meeting. As far as the association is concerned, you are in good standing. If Patricia pursues anything personally, That is between you and her, but the HOA is out of it." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was finally over. Mostly. Patricia's personal attorney sent one more letter restating the demand that I remove the lights and pay damages. This time, I had Eric respond with a detailed legal letter explaining why her claim lacked merit and suggesting that further action would result in a counter-suit for abuse of process and malicious prosecution. That apparently did the trick, because I never heard from her lawyer again. Patricia herself avoided me completely. On the rare occasions when I saw her around the neighborhood, she would turn and walk the other way. Her house went up for sale in April, listed at a price that seemed optimistic given the market. It sat empty for months. Marcus and I spent that spring and summer enjoying the yard, playing basketball and soccer, grilling out, just being a normal family. The lights stayed up, but we rarely used them except for an occasional evening game of catch. I had made my point, and there was no need to rub salt in the wound. In August, Patricia's house finally sold. I watched from my window as moving trucks loaded up her furniture and expensive landscaping decorations. A young couple with 2 small kids moved in a week later. They introduced themselves as Tom and Rebecca, friendly and excited about the neighborhood. When I mentioned I had the previous owner, Tom laughed. "Oh, we heard about her from the real estate agent. Something about HOA drama. The agent said the neighborhood was much more relaxed now." "Yeah, things are pretty chill these days," I agreed. Tom noticed the floodlights. "Those for night skiing or something, sledding, actually. My son and I use them in winter." "That is awesome. Our kids would love that. Maybe we could bring them over when it snows." "Absolutely. The more the merrier." That winter, when the first big snow came, Marcus and I fired up the lights and hit the slopes. Within an hour, Tom and Rebecca brought their kids over, sleds in hand. Denise Jackson showed up with her 3 boys. A few other families from the street wandered over, drawn by the lights and the laughter. What had started as a battle over rules and property rights had somehow turned into a neighborhood tradition. We spent the evening sledding together, kids and adults alike, the hill bright with light and echoing with joy. Someone brought thermoses of hot chocolate. Someone else brought cookies. It felt like community, the real kind, not the fake version enforced by petty bylaws and power-hungry board members. Later, after everyone had gone home and Marcus was asleep, I stood in my backyard looking at those lights. They had started as a symbol of petty revenge, a way to fight back against someone who made my life miserable. But they had become something better. They had become a beacon, literally, bringing people together. I thought about Patricia, wherever she was now, probably finding some new neighborhood to monitor and control. I hope she eventually found happiness, though I doubted it. Some people were just wired to be miserable, to find problems where none existed. As for me, I had learned some lessons. That sometimes you have to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. That community is built by people, not rules. That the time you spend with your kids is precious and worth fighting for. And that the best revenge is not making someone else miserable, it is building something good out of conflict. The lights stayed on for another hour that night, illuminating an empty hill covered in fresh snow. Tomorrow Marcus and I would be out there again, making new tracks, building new memories. And if the lights happened to shine a little brighter toward what used to be Patricia's house, well, that was just the natural result of positioning them for optimal sledding. I smiled to myself and went inside, already looking forward to tomorrow's runs. The HOA board, now consisting of Howard Chen, Brenda Sullivan, and a new member named Rick Harrison who worked as a teacher at the local high school, spent the next few months revising the bylaws. They held community input sessions and actually listened to what residents wanted. The noise restrictions were clarified to include specific decibel levels and reasonable exceptions for seasonal activities. A new complaint process was implemented that required actual evidence of harm, not just personal preference. Most importantly, they added a provision that board members themselves would be subject to regular compliance reviews to ensure rules were being applied fairly. It was a direct response to Patricia's selective enforcement, and it gave me faith that the association might actually serve the community rather than control it. Marcus and I settled into a comfortable rhythm. He spent half his time with me and half with his mother, and we made the most of our weeks together. The Sledding Hill became our special place, not just in winter but year-round. We built a zip line in the spring, set up a slip and slide in summer, and had leaf pile jumping competitions in fall. The neighborhood kids started treating my yard as the unofficial play zone. I did not mind. There were always children around, always laughter. It was exactly what I had hoped for when I bought the house, a place where Marcus could have a real childhood. I did hear from Patricia one more time, about a year after she moved. She sent a formal letter through her attorney demanding compensation for lost property value due to the hostile environment I had created. Eric responded that she had sold her house for above asking price, and any loss was due to market conditions, not my behavior. The claim was baseless, and we never heard anything further. Eric and I had a beer to celebrate the final resolution. We met at that same sports bar in Castle Rock where I had first sought his advice. "So, was it worth it?" Eric asked. "All the stress, the fighting, the drama," I thought about it carefully. "Honestly, yeah, not because I enjoyed the conflict, but because it taught me something important. I could have backed down immediately, paid the fines, stopped sledding, just gone along with unreasonable demands to avoid trouble. But that would have taught Marcus the wrong lesson, which is that bullies win if you let them, that rules matter more than relationships, that authority should never be questioned. I took a sip of my beer. Instead, he learned that sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, that communities work best when people talk to each other, not just follow arbitrary rules, that his dad will fight for the things that matter. Eric nodded slowly. "Yeah, okay. When you put it that way, I get it. Though maybe next time you could stand up for your principles without installing industrial lighting equipment specifically to annoy someone," I laughed. "No promises. But I will say, those lights have turned out to be the best investment I ever made. Not because of Patricia, but because of what they represent. Every time I turn them on, it is a reminder that this is my home, my space to make memories with my son. Nobody gets to take that away." We finished our beers and I drove back to Pine Ridge, back to my house with its floodlights and Sledding Hill and all the memories attached to them. Marcus was waiting, already in his snow pants even though it was barely starting to flurry. "Dad, can we go out, please?" I looked at the light snow just beginning to dust the ground. It probably was not even enough to sled on yet. But Marcus was looking at me with those hopeful eyes, and really, what else mattered? Get the sleds. I will turn on the lights. We spent the next hour slipping and sliding on barely enough snow to qualify as sledding, laughing the whole time. Tom and Rebecca's kids saw the lights and came over. Then Denise Jackson's boys. By the time we called it a night, there were 15 people in my backyard, adults and children, all playing in the first snow of the season under lights bright enough to turn dusk into daylight. Standing there watching the chaos and joy, I felt a deep sense of contentment. This was what home was supposed to be. This was what community could become when you stripped away the petty control and just let people be people. Patricia had tried to make me choose between following rules and spending time with my son. She had threatened fines, liens, lawsuits, all to enforce her vision of an orderly neighborhood where everyone stayed in their lanes and obeyed without question. But here was the truth she never understood. Community is not built through enforcement and fear. It is built through shared experiences, through people coming together around something they all care about. My sledding hill had become that gathering place, not because of some HOA mandate or planned activity, but organically, because people wanted to be there. The lights stayed on for another hour after the last family left. Marcus and I made hot chocolate and sat by the back window, looking out at the illuminated slope. "Dad," Marcus said quietly, "I am glad we did not let her win." "Me too, buddy, me too." The floodlights shone bright across the backyard, no longer symbols of conflict but markers of victory. Not victory over Patricia specifically, though that felt good too. Victory over the mindset that valued control over connection, rules over relationships, order over joy. I had bought this house to give Marcus a place to make memories. Patricia had tried to take that away. The lights were my way of saying no, you do not get to do that. And in saying no, in standing firm, I had found something even better than I had hoped for. The snow kept falling that night, soft and steady. By morning, the hill would be perfect for sledding. The lights would shine, the neighbors would gather, and we would spend another day building the kind of memories that last a lifetime. That was worth fighting for. That was worth a winter's worth of conflict with an angry HOA president. That was worth all of it. I turned off the lights and went to bed, already planning tomorrow's sledding adventure. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering everything in fresh white. Somewhere, Patricia was living in a new neighborhood, probably already identifying violations and preparing her first round of complaints. That was her choice, her path. Mine led here to this house, this yard, this community we had built together, and I would not trade it for anything.